Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive today. And we're going to be looking at what really matters at the heart of Christian faith. And we've got a really interesting mix of sources to unpack today.
Yeah.
We've got, we're going to be looking at a devotional from Theology of Work.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at God's database, which takes this really tech-savvy approach to denominations.
Interesting.
And we're even going to be listening to a little clip from a Catholic Answers podcast episode.
Wow, that's quite the blend.
It is.
Eh.
It is. And I think they all kind of speak to this idea of like really living authentically for God.
Absolutely.
And going beyond just the rituals and the labels.
Yeah, I think that's something that resonates a lot with people.
Absolutely. And speaking of getting real, that Theology of Work devotional really doesn't pull any punches.
Okay.
It jumps right in with this really powerful message from Psalm 50, basically reminding us that God desires genuine faithfulness over just going through the motions.
Yeah, he's not interested in just the outward show, right? It's about what's going on in the heart.
Exactly. It's like putting on our like Sunday best, you know?
Yeah. Huh.
But forgetting that true faith is about the condition of our hearts, not just our appearance. And the devotional goes on to talk about how this applies to, you know, even the hidden parts of our lives.
Interesting.
Like our daydreams, our secret ambitions, you know.
Right, those things that we think are just for us.
Right, like those things we don't necessarily share with other people, but it's like they're still part of that spiritual inventory.
They are, and I think that's a really challenging thought.
It is.
Because it's easy to compartmentalize our faith and say, well, this part of my life is for God, and this part is just for me.
Yeah, exactly.
But the reality is, God sees it all, right?
Right. He sees it all.
And so it's about integrating our faith into every aspect of who we are.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us to like this idea of love, right?
Yes.
Which is like this overarching theme in Jesus's teachings.
Absolutely. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind.
Yes. And love our neighbors as ourselves.
That's it. And that's not about just, you know, doing the rituals or checking the boxes.
Exactly. So it's not about racking up points for performing religious rituals.
Not at all. It's about directing our hearts towards God in everything we do.
Okay. So that makes sense.
And then our actions should flow from that love.
Right. Okay. I gotcha.
Not as a way to earn God's favor, but as a response to his love.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So it's about the heart.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that reminds me of the God's database article we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
Because it's all about, like, looking beyond the outward labels.
Right.
And not getting so caught up in, like, having the right label when it comes to faith.
Absolutely.
Have you ever felt that pressure, by the way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really common.
To feel like you have to fit in a certain box.
Yeah. Especially.
Or have all the right answers, you know?
Especially like in our current culture, right? Where everyone's kind of putting themselves into these neat little categories.
Yeah.
But this article is really refreshing because it kind of blows all that out of the water.
It does. Okay, so tell us, like, what's the main idea here? How does this whole God's database thing work?
Okay, so imagine a database, right? And in this database, you have all these different containers.
Okay.
And each container, you could think of it like a denomination.
Okay, so like one for Baptist, one for Methodist, like that.
Exactly. But here's the thing. God isn't as concerned with which container you're in.
Interesting.
He's more interested in the data inside.
Oh, I see. So like, it's not about belonging to a specific group.
It's more about what's in your heart. You know,
Yeah.
your faith, your actions, your relationship with him.
It's like he cares more about the content than the container.
Exactly. He's less concerned with which table you're sitting at and more about whether you're actually tasting the meal, you know?
I like that.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Okay, so it's not enough to just be part of a group.
Right.
It's about that individual connection with God.
Exactly. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right?
Right, exactly.
And the article takes this analogy even further by comparing our individual faith to software and denominations to operating systems.
Okay, so like Windows versus Mac.
Exactly. Whether you're using Windows or Mac or something else entirely, what really matters is the software you're running, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in this case, our faith is like the software,
Right.
and our denominations, they're like the operating system.
So it's like how we're living out our faith is the software.
Yes. And just like with software, there's a responsibility to make sure our code is, you know, clean and functioning properly.
So it's like if we want to connect with God,
Yeah,
that application needs to be working correctly.
exactly. If you want the software to run smoothly, right?
Okay, I like that.
It's a good analogy.
So does that mean we all have to have the same code, though? Like, do we all have to be carbon copies of each other?
That's the beauty of it. We don't. Just like there are different programming languages.
Okay.
There are different expressions of faith.
So we can have different traditions, different approaches.
Exactly.
But still, like, recognize those core truths that unite us.
Yeah. It's like learning a new language, right? People might have different accents or ways of expressing themselves, but the core grammar needs to be there for communication to happen.
That's a good point.
So it's not about achieving perfect uniformity, but recognizing that unity and diversity aren't mutually exclusive.
Right. It's like we can appreciate all the different accents.
Exactly.
But still be speaking the same language.
Exactly.
That's a great way to think about it. And speaking of finding unity amidst all that diversity, it reminds me of the Catholic Answers podcast episode that we wanted to touch on today.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, not everyone listening might identify as Catholic.
Right.
But stick with us here, because there's some really interesting points about Christian unity.
Absolutely.
That I think really resonate, regardless of your specific denomination.
Yeah, they made a really good point about how, like, true Christian unity, it comes from seeking truth together.
Okay.
And aligning ourselves with those earliest teachings of the Christian faith.
Right, so like going back to the source.
Exactly. And they really emphasize the importance of having like a reliable source for those teachings.
Which kind of makes you think about how we decide what's actually authoritative when it comes to faith.
It does. It's a big question, right?
It is a big question.
And it's one that each of us has to kind of wrestle with on our own faith journeys.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think the emphasis on historical continuity is really important.
Okay, how so?
Well, it reminds us that, like, we're not just isolated individuals trying to figure this all out on our own.
Okay.
We're part of something much bigger, you know?
Right, like this long line of believers stretching way back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can learn from their experiences, their insights.
That's a good point, and it makes me think about that story from What Really Matters.
Okay, yeah.
About the scratch coffee table.
Oh, yeah, I love that story.
Where the author is like freaking out about this scratch on their table.
Right, totally consumed by it.
Yes, and then they realize, like, wait a minute.
My priorities are all messed up.
Yes, exactly. It's just a table,
It's about the people you share it with.
Yes. And it's like, who cares if there's a scratch as long as you've got people you love sitting around it.
Right, the memories you make.
Exactly. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us that, when it comes to faith, it's not about the material stuff.
It's about investing in what lasts.
Exactly. The things that really matter.
Relationships, character, our faith.
Exactly.
Those are the things that have eternal significance.
Yes. And that ties back to what we were talking about earlier with, like, storing up treasures in heaven, not on earth.
Absolutely. It's about shifting our focus from the outward to the inward.
Yes.
From the material possessions to the things that truly enrich our souls.
And I think that's a good place to wrap up our deep dive for today.
Yeah.
A lot to think about.
Absolutely.
Hopefully this has given everyone listening some food for thought.
I hope so.
And maybe even inspired you to take a look at your own life and ask yourself, what really matters?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. And if your life were a book, would faith just be a chapter title?
Okay.
Or would it be the theme woven throughout the whole story?
Wow. That's a powerful image.
It is something to think about.
It is. Thanks for that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.